which is a alternative to the Opal data warehouse, and the ongoing work to integrate this with the Molgenis suite. Okay.
Yes, I can unmute. That's nice. Okay. Yes. So the Armadillo platform, and then especially the LifeCycle and well, athlete and longitudinal use case as well, of course, because that's starting off right now in terms of that. The first node of athlete and longitudinals are also set up. What are we going to talk about? So key features of the Armadillo platform in combination with the Molgenis suite, and then the researcher perspective, the data management perspective, and the system administrator's perspective I wanted to show, and then a demo, and the demo will be focusing on the research perspective. So how you actually walk through the different steps of getting access to the platform and do your analyses. Okay, the key features. So we tried to keep the architecture as simple as possible. So this is actually resembles the architecture that Opal uses as well. Only the difference is that the Armadillo portion of the deployment is very small, so it's only doing the DataSHIELD commands, validation, and giving back the results and accepting the request of the client. So this is very small, and the file storage. So we choose to have a file storage instead of a database behind the. As a data source within the Armadillo deployment, because the file storage is compatible with the RServe compute environment. So R initially deals with files usually, so for larger data files, and the file storage. So the file storage actually serves the RServe compute environment with the data that you need to have here. And when you do the actual request, so if you want to have the mean of the variable height, then the Armadillo shield is actually determining if you can make the request, and if you can make the request, then it's determining if height is available on the file storage, and then it makes a copy action to the compute environment from the file storage to actually make the data available here. And this needs to be fast, so you can actually do your calculations in a fast way. So that's why we choose actually a file storage approach instead of having another backend as a source for your data. So that's what we try to actually make it as simple and as efficient as possible to expose the DataSHIELD interface actually. So that's what the simple architecture is about. Then one of the main things when you actually authenticate to the Armadillo platform is that it's always delegating to an authentication server. So you need to have a connection with an external identity provider, which means that you can connect it to your institute identity provider or something that you host by yourselves. But it tries to federate the authentication to another service, and that's useful within LifeCycle, because when LifeCycle started off, there was that much users that were actually authenticating against the platform, but it grows and it grows and it grows, and then as a researcher you need to deal with, well, within LifeCycle now, approximately 25 sets of credentials for each of the servers that you want to access. So we want to try to actually migrate to one set of credentials to authenticate to the whole platform. And then I do say authenticate because there's a difference between authentication to the platform and the authorization to the platform. So authorization means what data you can actually see. So if you can see data and what data you can actually see, and authentication means that you are known to the platform, so to the LifeCycle athletes known to the platform. So this is how it works when you authenticate. You will be redirected to the UMCG authentication server, and then Elixir is a sort of single sign-on service of research institutes that are within Europe. So Elixir allows you to log in via the Cambridge identity provider, or via the UMCG identity provider, or via the Copenhagen University identity provider. And that's something that I will show in the demo as well, that you will be redirected through your own institute, and then you come back to the Armadillo to do your analysis. And the things that are tied to the central authentication server are the central analysis server, which is actually the client. So your own Studio in terms of if you do not have an analysis server, and all the Armadillo instances at the moment. And we're going to try to connect the Opal instances that we have as well. Then, with the help of the OVA team, we now have the ability to upgrade easily. So in LifeCycle, when we needed to upgrade the DSBase package on the server side, it was kind of a pain to actually do that, because you need to install additional dependencies. The R version needs to match and stuff like that. So it was always, when you upgrade one cohort, it took 2 weeks to get it stable, and then the other one, and the other one, and the other one. So you have a span of sometimes 3 or 4 months to get the whole platform upgraded. And as you know, that the client side package needs to be the same as the server side package if you want to use DataSHIELD. So in that 4 months, there was a lot of trouble of doing your actual analysis, because there was a lot of different versions within the platform. So we now can actually put another instance of the DSBase environment next to the one that's already existent on the cohorts deployment of the Armadillo or the Opal as well, because Opal is actually has the same sort of strategy of actually having multiple R server environments next to each other. And this is not only for the DSBase packages, but also for the other community packages. So for now, there are only 1 or 2 versions of the community packages, but you can imagine that it will increase over time. And also the dependencies of the community package on the DSBase client is also relevant. So if you have, for example, the DS mediation package at this moment, where we have just released 001, well, when we are going to use it, other versions will arise, and maybe it will be dependent on the DSBase 6.2.0. So the need for fixed environments for those packages is, I think, very necessary to keep it stable. So this is what you can expect over time. And one of the catches here is that you need to, if you do not use a clusterized environment to deploy the Armadillo, you need to spread the resources that the server has over the different several RServe profiles that you have. And that's something that we need to take a look at in the future, to how to do that efficiently. Because a server has a certain amount of resources, and it can be stretched out infinitely. So something for the future, I guess. When we developed the Armadillo, we thought of how we going to serve the actual users, and we thought it would be wise to actually keep it in the R environment, because DataSHIELD itself is in the R environment. A lot of the harmonization was done in R, and we can deal with several harmonization approaches in R. So we have developed a DataSHIELD client, which you need always, with the DS Molgenis Armadillo, which is an equivalent of DS Opal. Then you have a DataSHIELD management client, which is Molgenis Armadillo, and Opal has an equivalent, which is Opal R. And then we have a central authentication library. So the Molgenis Auth is actually enabling us to authenticate to an external ID provider. So that wasn't already available in R, but we developed it so you can actually use it. And this is a generic library, so you can use it in whatever R project you want if you need to connect to a central authentication mechanism. And the 2 packages below are not necessarily part of the Armadillo platform, but are used to actually upload the data into the Armadillo and Opal within the LifeCycle and Athlete and Longitudes project. And that's what I'm going to show from the data management perspective later on, how that actually works. So DS Upload is used to upload the data, and DS Helper is a project that Tim Cadman has started, and is actually creating helper functions for DataSHIELD, but it's also part of the platform that we are actually developing. So it's also now part of the default RServe environment that we use as a client for DataSHIELD. Okay, now the research perspective. At this moment, we have actually this setup. So we have 1 central analysis server and I think 25 cohorts, which are running either Opal or the Armadillo, which have 1 RServe environment. And what we're actually now working on is getting this environment. So you have multiple profiles within your central analysis environment. So you can actually use several clients to actually spin up a client environment of your own. And then in the backend, so in the cohorts, you have also the ability to use the profiles. So you can actually log into the central analysis environment, which has the profile DS-based client 620, and then you need to choose the profile 620 on the Armadillo or Opal that you're connecting to, and then it will allow you to be in that environment and do your analysis based upon those packages. So that's what we're now trying to move forward to. And in the cohorts deployments, we managed to get most of the cohorts ready to actually use the profiles. And now we have, I think last month, we have actually managed to get the Jupyter Hub analysis server running, which serves the several profiles on the client side, but I will show that in a minute. Then the data manager. So this is the actual process of uploading the data either to Opal or the Armadillo. I've now sketched the process for the Armadillo with the same yields for Opal. So you have, as a cohort data manager, you harmonize the data. And this is done mostly in several formats. So some data managers use data or SPSS or SAS or R or CSV or whatever they choose. You can use that for input for the DS upload. Then the DS upload package downloads the common data model for the project. For a LifeCycle, you have the model stored in a GitHub repository, which are actually Excel files, and then Excel files describe how the data should look like. And then it checks the data with the common data model. So it checks if the column names are correct, and if the data types are correct, and if the categories that you have for categorical values are correct, and stuff like that. And if it's not correct, then it gives feedback. And if it's correct, then it uploads the data to the Armadillo server. And the source of these models are changing over time. So now we have the models in GitHub, but that's a very cumbersome process. So we try to actually migrate to the data catalog that we have for LifeCycle Active Longer Tools. And then you can actually specify which common data model you want to use as a source for the DS upload package. And then it will talk to the API of the data catalog and then extract the model in that way. So you won't have to deal with Excel files in GitHub anymore. So that's the idea of the integration with the Molgenis catalog. So that's the initial data upload. So when that's done, so there's a version for each harmonized data set that you want to upload. And if you want to make subsets or do quality control and stuff like that, then you have the other R package, the Molgenis Armadillo, which is able to load the data back from the Armadillo back to your local client and do some quality control, or it can subset the data. So if you want to create a view in terms of Opal, then you can actually select certain variables from the initial uploaded set, and then you say, well, this is specifically for example, Johan Vinther, for his study, he needs these variables, and you specify the variables and it creates a subset on the Armadillo, and you can give permissions on that subset. So that's how data managers use the system. And last but not least, how to install the whole deployment. We try to, this is a bit technical, but we try to stick to the methods that the system administrator use the most, we hope. So for instance, if you deploy on a VM environment, a virtual machine environment, so a virtualized server environment, we provide an Ansible Galaxy repository, which is actually a collection of deployment scripts that system administrators usually use to also deploy their other infrastructure. And then they can use that to actually deploy the Armadillo, which is you download the collection, you specify the parameters, and you run the playbook, which is part of the Ansible structure. And then you have a deployed server. And the same yields for a clusterized environment. So if you have a large cohort, which needs to have a lot of R sub capacity, then we try to move them to a sort of scalable environment, which usually means Kubernetes cluster, which is a scalable environment, and we have deployment scripts for that as well. So Kubernetes uses Helm, which is a generic mechanism to actually deploy applications on the Kubernetes cluster. So we try to stick to the general best practices in each environment. Okay, now for the demo. Oh, sorry. Maybe I need to close down the browser to make sure I do not have any sessions. No, I do have sessions. That's a shame. Maybe I can do that privately now. Okay. So this is actually the client side of the DataSHIELD analysis server. So you have an RStudio when you open up this environment. And first of all, you need to sign in. And this is actually authenticating you in the central analysis and central authentication server of the LifeCycle at the Longitude project. So if I click on it, I will be redirected to the authentication server. And then you see here an Elixir login button. So this, I click on this, and I will be redirected to the single sign-on from Elixir. Then I will type in my institute from the UMCG in Groningen. To the UMCG in Groningen. Then I use my own credentials to log in. I can't remember the password, so I need to look it up. This guy. Yes, yes. And then the code, yes, okay, the code. 352 481 verify. Okay, and now to show you what actually happened. So I went from, maybe do that here. What? No. Need to move up. Yeah, I need to move up. Here it was. So I logged in on the central analysis server. It redirected me to the authentication server. It redirected to the Elixir. Then I came to the UMCG, and then this guy sent me back to Elixir, back to the authentication server, and back to the analysis server. So now I'm back on the analysis server. I see here my files, and then I'm going to boot my RStudio. So what I'm going to show you now is actually that you have several environments that you can choose. So now I think I choose the Exposome environment, but I did not do it explicitly. So I will do it now again. Stop. And then start. Ouch. So here I have the profile. So I have the DS base client at 610, I have the base client 620 development, and I have the DS Exposome client 101. So I will now choose the default environment, which is 610 at the moment, and it will start up the environment that we just had. And the files that you have stored in this environment are shared over the different profiles. So you can use your analysis script within the different profiles if you want. So here we have this, and then I boot our studio again. Here we are. Okay. Here is the profiles demo default. So you can see here that they have the DS base client pre-installed with 610 and all the additional packages that I need as well. And because of the profiles are new, I need to reinstall the DS Molgenis Armadillo, but usually you won't have to do that. So now I have, and then I can see, okay, So this is actually what Yannick has developed in the DSI. So you're able to choose a profile. So here you see that I'm now actually connecting to the Armadillo via the central analysis server, central authentication server again. I click on submit, and I have already a session because I have a session here on the central authentication server. So I do not have to fill in my credentials again. And then I choose no profile because the default profile is defaultly chosen. So I'm going to connect to the server. Then I do DataSHIELD profiles, and then I can see that the default profiles is actually set. And when I check the methods, you can see that I've, well, a couple of base methods that I can execute, but mostly it's the DS base package 610. And if I do the other one, control panel, let's stop the server. And this takes a while, and then start it again. So switching between profiles takes some time, but usually I think you choose a profile for a day or something like that, and then you work on that. And the reason why we pre-installed those environments was, for example, DS exposome uses the vectors package from the bioconductor repository. And in LifeCycle, most of the users are, well, just used to use R, but dependency management is a bit hard for everyone to understand, but at least to actually go through as a researcher. So we try to facilitate them as much as possible. So if you open up the environments, and you can see in the client side here, yeah, okay, that you have the DS base client and DS exposome package available, and you can load them as well. And then on the server side, you can now choose for them. I think I do not have to do this, but that's just to be sure. On the server side, you can choose now for the exposome profile. And that's something that you need to do actively. So it doesn't mean if you choose the client-side profile exposome, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're connecting to the server-side exposome profile as well. You need to do that in your login block. Let's see. Sign in. Now you can see that the exposome profile is valid. So I log in on the same server, which contains the default mediation profile and the exposome profile. And if you then check the exposome methods that you can execute on the server side, you can see here that you have the DS exposome 101 methods available in this environment. So that's what we're trying to facilitate as much as possible. So now we're actually centralizing the installation of the server side as well as the client side. I think that concludes the demo and my presentation as well. Any questions?
That's very nice, Sido, and I think that definitely the profiles will really help analysis in DataSHIELD. Do we have any questions? Gabriella.
Yeah, I was unmuting and muting myself continuously. Hi, Sido. Thank you so much. Amazing work. My question is about some issues that I'm having when I'm connected to ALSPAC, which is the only study that I've been using up to now, which uses Molgenis. I tend to be disconnected around probably after 10-15 minutes of inactive work in terms of actual analysis, like running models or running descriptives, whatever. And that is quite disruptive because not only I get disconnected by the study, I get disconnected by, I get disconnected from, everything else. So I have to rerun every single step of the analysis. I'm not able to save the the work environment. And yeah, that you know, sometimes, especially after I coded, well, I do have a quite long script where I coded a few variables already, and that one, I have to rerun everything from scratch.
That's a shame. I think
a massive shame.
Yeah, exactly.
But that has only been happening since I started working with Alspach through Molgenis. So if I exclude Alspach from my analysis, then everything runs smoothly. I don't get disconnected every 10 minutes. Yeah, I don't know whether anyone else is having the same problems working with these data sets.
I have as well, Gabriella, and I would say I have the same issue with the G21 from Portugal.
And
if I'm being inactive, it requires me to reload everything, to log into all servers and reload all the whole workspace again. So that's, I find it frustrating as well.
Mm-hmm. And I've also heard someone else who works with Beeb, born in Bradford, as well, having the same problem. So this is something that we should try and sort out as soon as possible. Is the only problem that I'm having up now that's been a bit disruptive for my analysis with Molgenis.
Right. Okay. Well, that's something to dive into, I think. It could be, because if it's also generation 21, then it could be due to the Dockerized deployment, which is now actually the default. So then we definitely need to sort it out, because otherwise you will experience if other cohorts are migrating to the Docker deployment, either Opal or Armadillo, then you will experience the same issues, I guess. So, but it's good to know. So I will definitely look into that.
Sido, can I ask you one question as well?
Yes, you can.
So I'm working with the G21. They are at version 6.1, and I'm working with 15 other cohorts. They're at version 6.10. So every time I need to write to Gonzalo or Andre to change the version for me to do anything, is it possible to work on different versions? Or yeah,
that's the idea.
Because that's, I think.
That's
yeah,
that's the main idea of the profiles, that you have both environments available on the server, and it's also allowing us to migrate a bit more faster, I think, to the new version of DataSHIELD, and allow us to keep the current version running, because that was the main problem at the last upgrades. But when we finish the migration to the Dockerized deployment, I think those issues with the different versions of the DataSHIELD package should be resolved quite soon. But we now finishing up with the last cohort to actually migrate to the Docker deployment, but it needs to be in place first before we can actually upgrade the whole network. So that's what we're now working on. But so what I just showed is actually the future of how we deal with upgrades. So for instance, Imma is now also upgrading to Opal 4.2, I think, which contains the profiles as well. So we can upgrade then to 6.2.0 quite fast, and also gradually for one cohort at a time, but still remain the current functionality. So that's the idea then, I think. And I think the same can be done for generation 21 if the Coral deployment is actually capable of running Opal 4.2 with the profiles in the ROC server, but I do not know what the status is at the moment.
I'd just like to say thank you to Johan, because you're one of the people that really helped us identify this problem and allow it to be worked on. So it's very useful. It will be upgraded at some point.
Just before we end this talk, Morris has a question in the chat. Can you run both profiles in parallel on the same user, so on different RStudios?
No, because you can only run one RStudio. Well, maybe you can run two profiles. Yeah, I think you can. So you can run two profiles with one user on two RStudios, but you can't run two RStudios within one profile, if that makes sense. So if you started up the Jupyter Hub in the default environment, you can't spin up two RStudios, but you can spin up 2 Jupyter hubs, one for DS Exposome and one for the default environment, and then spin up 2 RStudios within that environment that you have booted up. So that's possible.
And one very quick question from Yannick.
Yeah, no, it's just an answer to this question. Tomorrow I will explain some the client profile approach. So there is a way to isolate the different version of packages on the client as well in RStudio. So whether you can run different sessions, it's different question, but if you can have a different environment on the client side as well. So there is a concept of profile on the client side.
Okay, very nice. Okay, we look forward to that tomorrow. So we'll move on now to Johan from the University of Copenhagen, and he's going to talk about his study examining the associations between gestational age and later body size. And this is a very interesting study because it's, among other things, at both combining data from Europe and also Canada and Australia. Okay.
One second. Can you see the slides? Okay. Yeah, thank you, Angela, and thank you, Sido, for the nice presentation before. So this has been quite a long journey, as you can imagine. I've prepared a research study on more than 200,000 individuals from 16 cohorts using DataSHIELD. And this is a project that's done within the LifeCycle and the You Can Connect consortium, also called the EU Child Cohort Network. And yeah, it's a study on 16 cohorts, and I just want to briefly run through the agenda for this short presentation. So I'll talk a bit about the research study, aim and objectives, then the data, then I'll just briefly mention a few of the packages and functions I've used in DataSHIELD for those who are interested. Then short about the main findings, a few supplementary analysis, and then a quick summary. So as Angela said, this particular study looks at the association between gestational age at birth and later body dimensions from early infancy to adulthood. And gestational age, the exposure in completed weeks from week 28 to 43. And the outcome of this study is both body mass index, Z-scores, and a binary outcome, overweight obesity, which is based on these Z-scores. And the Z-scores are external Z-scores from the WHO reference and standards. The outcomes are measured at 5 age periods from 0 to 2 years, 2 to 5, 5 to 9, 9 to 14, and 14 to 19. So it covers both early infancy, childhood, and adolescence. And I've been so lucky to be able to have access to a lot of different confounders. So I have sex, maternal age, maternal pre-pregnancy BMI, maternal height, maternal education, ethnicity, smoking during pregnancy, gestational diabetes, also gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, and parity. And all cohorts have a large variety of these confounders, but a few cohorts are missing a few of the informations. So yeah, I'll come back to the statistical analysis a bit later, but briefly I will mention, as Angela said, I have cohorts from Europe, 13, as you see, from Northern Europe, from Central and Southern Europe, and I have 2 cohorts from Canada, and 1 cohort from Australia, and in total I have included 233,266 children in the study. You see the vast majority, of course, from Europe, with more than 200,000, and the North American and Australian cohorts are relatively smaller. The sample size within each study range from approximately 1,300 to up to 80,000, and maybe many of you knows, but the largest ones are from Denmark and Norway, DNBC and MOBA. In total, I have more than 500,000 measurements of BMI. So that's quite unique for this study. As you see, and as said, the outcome is BMI and overweight obesity at 5 different age periods, and the cohorts contribute with data in 2 to 5 age periods. I think it's Eden contributing to 2 age periods, and Alsbeck in the UK contributing to all. As you see, the most are in the first age period and in the third period, and that's because MOBA and DNBC have data in both these 2 periods. Yeah, I won't go more into the numbers. This is advertisement and acknowledgement as well for the packages and functions of DataSHIELD, besides all the manipulation, all the things that Sido has been talking about. Then I've used the package called DS Helper, which is made by Tim Catman, previously at University of Bristol, but now at University of Copenhagen. And he has made some very nice functions, also useful for this study. He's made the function DH make outcome, which derives single outcomes in specified time periods. For example, some of the cohorts have multiple measurements in the different age periods, and here using this function, it's possible to choose the earliest or the latest or specified outcome within a specified period. So that's quite useful. Then I've used the DH subject has data, which indicate whether a subject has non-missing variables or not, which is also useful when you finish your final data set. And the DH find vars index return an index of variables for a given cohort, which is also quite useful. Then I've used the DS get WGSR, which is to create the set scores from the WHO package, which is available in R and Stata as well, of course. And Dimitri has been the one leading this, so that's been quite useful for my study as well. And then the DS GLM SLMA, which fits a general linear mixed effects model via the study level meta-analysis, has been quite crucial for this study as well. So this is yeah, both advertisement and acknowledgement for these people. Then shortly, descriptive statistics. I'll come in shortly, and then a 2-stage study level meta-analysis, both on both outcomes. I've used it for the mixed effects linear regression models for BMI and the mixed effects logistic regression models for the odds of overweight and obesity. And then I will present just shortly the supplementary analysis where I've stratified the analysis by sex, and where instead of using gestational age as a continuous exposure, I've performed analysis with gestational age as a categorical exposure. So obviously there's a lot of numbers here which are unreadable for many of you, but I think the key message here is that there's geographical variations in both the exposure of interest gestational age. Many of the cohorts have data from week 28 to 43, but a few only have data from week 30 or week 32, but also there's variations within each week across the cohorts. And also in terms of the outcome of interest, the BMI and overweight obesity, we have differences. Like I said, data at different time points, but also the proportion and the mean estimates for BMI and overweight obesity varies across the different cohorts. And I won't go deeper into this, but if you're interested, you can contact me, and I'll love to show you the results. Then also maternal education, as you can see in the bars, and maternal ethnicity, body size, and smoking during pregnancy varies across the cohorts. Especially for the education and ethnicity, there's quite some variations between the cohorts. Then, as you see, the blue spots here are missing. That means that a few of the cohorts do not have information about ethnicity, or gestation diabetes, or hypertension, or preeclampsia. So we have adjusted differently in the models, in the statistical models, leaving out this information in a few of the cohorts. Some main findings which have been long on the way, as you can imagine. Here we see the mixed effect linear regression with gestational age and BMI in the 5 age periods, and you see there is a positive association in the first 3 periods. Small magnitudes of the association, largest in the first periods, but around adolescence, 9 years, we see no association between the two. This covers this shows the mean difference in BMI set scores for 1 week change in gestational age. So in the age of 0 to 2 years, having a longer gestational duration is associated with a higher BMI set score. And these regression models, as said, are adjusted for sex and a lot of other sex and maternal age, pre-pregnancy BMI, maternal height, maternal education, and smoking, and parity in all cohorts. And then other cohorts were able to adjust additionally for ethnicity, gestational diabetes, hypertension, and preeclampsia. So this were for BMI as the outcome. Looking at gestational age and odds of overweight obesity, we see quite a similar pattern in the first 2 age periods, where in the last 2 periods we see a negative association, meaning that shorter duration, gestational duration, is associated with the higher odds of being overweight and obese. And you see the confidence intervals as well reach 1.0, and you see to the right that the number of studies and subjects decrease over time. So we have fewer in the latest age periods. Only 4 studies have data between 14 and 19 years, but looking at the 4th period between 19 and 14 years, we have 12 studies and approximately 50,000 people. So these are the 2 main results, and then I've stratified by sex to see whether this gives any more information. And we see here with the linear regression with the gestation age and body mass index, there are not huge differences between males and females across the 5 age periods. And we see the confidence intervals are wide in the first age period and the last age period. On the other hand, when we look at gestational age and odds of overweight and obesity, we see that from 5 years and onwards, it seems like we have a difference between males and females. We see it being more pronounced in adolescence, where females being born preterm seems to have a higher odds of being overweight compared to full term, where for boys this is more blurred, the picture. So overall, we see that it seems that the association is positive in childhood and also in the late childhood, whereas in adolescence something is happening. And And obviously looking at gestation age as a continuous variable, it gives you some information, but I've also looked at gestation age in categories to see whether this gives us more information. So splitting up the groups in very preterm, late preterm, early term, full term, and post term. So this is mean differences in BMI set scores compared to full term, and we see that those being born, very preterm and also late term have a lower BMI set scores compared to the full term, whereas those early term and post term are more closely close to full term. This changed a bit when we look at gestation age and odds of overweight and obesity, because here we see that in late childhood and in adolescence, actually, although wide confidence intervals show this uncertainty, we have it seems like being born preterm actually increases the odds of being overweight and obese already from late childhood, being the case for those born very early, but also those born late and early term compared to full term. So this is quite interesting and supports some of the previous findings that actually being born preterm increases the odds of being overweight and obese around adulthood. So these are quite interesting results. Then I think time is soon up. Just a short summary. So we managed to combine data from some 16 cohorts in 3 continents on more than 200,000 individuals, which is quite unique, and has been quite a journey. For 2 years, we have been struggling or working with this study, and there's been many difficulties while DataSHIELD was developing. But DataSHIELD works now, which is great to see. And I was really happy to show these results, and happy to see that more people are presenting results later today. It works, and we're able to bring analysis to the data rather than bringing data to the analysis, which was previously the case. Just a short summary for the research study. So gestational age is positively associated with BMI in infancy and childhood, but the association attenuates by adolescence, with children born preterm on average reaching the same level of BMI as those born term. But if we focus on not the people being born early term, but only the people being born before week 39, actually preterm children remain lighter than term counterparts. For overweight and obesity, this is different. So shorter duration, gestational duration is associated with lower odds of being overweight and obese in infancy and early childhood, but by adolescence, children born preterm have higher odds of being overweight and obese compared to full-term peers. And this association, as I showed you, is stronger in girls than boys. So yeah, children born preterm have increased odds of being overweight and obese in childhood and adolescence compared to full-term, as opposed to BMI, where they reach a similar level by adulthood. Acknowledgement to the whole DataSHIELD development team, to Dimitri and to Paul, of course, and to my LifeCycle colleagues, Tim Cadman and of course Sido has been a huge help for this study, which I need to say has received funding from the EU Horizon 2020 research program and the Data Plus pool at University of Copenhagen. So that was it for me, Angela.
Very nice. I can appreciate that it must be quite a challenge working with so many cohorts. So we take questions now. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand using the emotions, the reactions. Okay, so Andre?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic piece of work. Congratulations. It's really amazing to see that. Yeah, brilliant. I'm a bit blown away by the whole thing. I had a couple of more epidemiological questions, really. One was, did you think about adjusting for size at birth? Because there obviously there have been links shown between small for gestational age or low birth weight rather, and subsequent outcomes, and also things like small for gestational age is probably more common amongst preterm births than it is amongst term births. So that's the first question. And then the second question, similar kind of lines, was did you think about using hierarchical modeling? This is something that Tim recently showed me. And again, that's because of shared environmental factors for multiple births. And again, multiple births are more common in preterm births than at term.
Yeah. So to start with the last one, this study started 2 years ago, where a lot of the functions and statistical analysis were not available. So we started out. This is my first PhD study, and I'm soon to be done. So we started out 2 years ago with a very simple statistical approach. So some of the models and statistical techniques were not available back then, and I didn't change it afterwards. So that was just to comment on the last bit. The first bit about birth weight. It's true. It's definitely important to look at the role of birth weight. I'm not doing it in this study, and for different reasons. You could say that does birth weight is it a confounder? Is it associated, and does it lead to gestational age? Is it associated with gestational age and the outcome, or is it gestational age being a confounder for the association between birth weight and BMI? So yeah, I chose not to include it in this, but certainly there are different ways of tackling this. So I appreciate your point, Andre, and I would like to discuss it with you later on as well.
Yeah, no, I'd love to discuss it. I think it's a really fascinating piece of work. And I think that, just to refer to that point quickly, is I think that may be something that when you come to submit, that's something that you need to be aware of and either include in your discussion or to have some responses ready for reviewers. It may be that you want to just do a couple of, now that you've got all the code and everything, is to do a couple of sensitivity analyses so that you've already got that covered. But yeah, no, I'd be very happy to discuss it. I've got another question. I see no one else has raised their hand yet. This is on the more technical side of things. Was just I was very impressed with your graphs, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how you got them. Did you produce them using DataSHIELD, or did you extract the data and then produce them separately outside of DataSHIELD? And
it's good. It's a good question. And to be honest, I started learning R and DataSHIELD a short time ago, and for me it was easiest to extract the data and put it into Excel and made the figures. But I know it's easily done in R. I know that Tim have done them, but for me to present this, I just finalized the analysis last week, so it was easy for me to do it in Excel. But I know that it's more than feasible in DataSHIELD.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Marvelous piece of work.
Thank you.
I just have one question. If no one else has any questions, it was just that I noticed that there's a lot of you see quite a lot of heterogeneity between your studies, and I was just wondering if you try to kind of explore that in any way. Do you see because it's quite a broad study, and it encompasses Canada and Australia, whether or not you see larger differences between different countries?
I did actually make additional analysis, meta regression analysis, to see what drove this heterogeneity. And I just finalized it last week, and I didn't put them in this this presentation because of time actually. But I did make sensitivity analysis with the meta-regressions to see what actually drove this heterogeneity.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we'll wait for the paper to.
Yeah, but there were I looked it up for ethnicity and education, but also geography as well, and especially the ethnicity and education were driving this heterogeneity.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting research. So now we'll move on to our final speaker for this session. It's Gabriella from the University of Liverpool, and she's looking at exploring social gradients in maternal mental health and how this influences children's psychosocial outcomes. And can't see Gabriella. Oh, there, yeah. Hi.
Hello, hi everyone. Can you see my presentation here? It's okay.
Yes.
I'm going to slide share now, so it should be ready now. Yeah, okay. So let me try to just change the slides. Yeah. Hello everyone, it's a real pleasure to be here today, and I just briefly introduce myself. I work as a research associate at the University of Liverpool with Professor David Taylor Robinson, Daniela Schluter, and for this project we also work together with Dimitri Savram from Newcastle University, Angela, Anne-Marie and Katrine Strandberg Larsen from the University of Copenhagen, and of course a lot of key contributors from LifeCycle and DataSHIELD, the LifeCycle and DataSHIELD communities. Just because, yeah, I echo all the acknowledgements that were made before by Johan, and there might not be time to do this at the end of the presentation. I just want to thank you all in advance. So today I will present some preliminary results from the analysis carried out in DataSHIELD for the LifeCycle Consortium, in particular the Work Package 6 project, how do early years risk factors mediate inequalities in child mental health, with a specific focus on the analysis of child socio-emotional development in the 8 birth cohorts, birth and pregnancy cohorts that I have access to. So this is just like a brief outline summary of my presentation. And so I look at the objectives of the study and the theoretical model, as well as giving a brief overview of the theoretical framework. Then we look into the study population and the methods with a very brief overview of mediation analysis. Then I'll have 3 sections on results. First of all, some descriptive results on the prevalence of, including, also prevalence of maternal mental health indicators. Then inequalities in maternal mental health, and then some results, preliminary results from the generalized linear model study level meta-analysis for the age group 10 to 14 years old mostly. And then a conclusion about the next steps, in particular, looking at the possibility to run mediation analysis in DataSHIELD. So the objectives for this project are primarily 2. So describe inequalities in socio-emotional behavioral problems and cognitive development in a comparative perspective. And then assess the mediating role of a set of theoretically relevant early years mediators. So on top of these primary objectives, we also aim to develop a simulation study on the potential impact of public health intervention on mediating pathways for child health. But today, today's presentation will focus mostly, well, only on the first 2 points. So the diagram here presents our study's theoretical model, where we aim to assess the mechanism behind the relationship between socioeconomic conditions and a set of child mental health outcomes as mediated by a set of intervening variables, such as maternal mental health during and after pregnancy, smoking in pregnancy, breastfeeding, and gestational age, and controlled by a set of confounders, such as single parenthood, maternal age at birth, and pre-pregnancy, and maternal age at birth, and pre-pregnancy maternal health status. So for this presentation, I will focus only on the specific outcome related to the child mental health indicators, which is externalizing issues, which relate specifically to problematic behaviors and reflect the child negatively acting on the external environment, what in the common knowledge is known as bad behavior. So as you can see here, I just tried and put together an explanation of what externalizing problems are. And the main construct is that it defines behavioral problems that are manifested in children's outward behavior and reflect the child negatively acting on the external environment. So everyone knows more what BMI is, but I thought that maybe perhaps externalizing is not as well known to today's audience. So why does this construct matters to public health and social policy? So first of all, externalizing issues are considered as indicators of general mental health in children. And also, externalizing has been found to predict later life outcomes from education to occupation to health. And also looking at externalizing and therefore indicators was an indicator of mental health through the inequalities lenses. Research has found that adverse childhood experiences, called also as ACEs, also has found ACEs to affect the severity of externalizing issues from very early stages of a child's life. So this graph, for instance, presents results from another health inequalities policy research team project, which has given, it's been now accepted for publication in the the Lancet Regional Health Journal. So it's going to be available soon. And what we presented here are results using the Millennium Cohort Study data and showing that socio-emotional behavioral problems at age 14 are strongly related to parental persistent poverty and poor mental health and to other trajectories of life course disadvantage. So, yes, I have to say that the studies available up to now in the literature on the effect of socioeconomic inequalities on children's mental health are largely based on single country or single cohort studies, or at most on comparisons of two countries or cohorts. So in this slide, I aim to very briefly give you an overview of what mediation analysis aims to do. So we planned on applying causal mediation analysis under what is called the counterfactual framework. So our exposure is socioeconomic conditions, which is the in the life cycle cohorts are measured adhered by the different measures, really. But what I'll be using here is the EU-SILC equivalized household income for most of the cohorts and parental education for some other cohorts. Our outcome is, as I said, externalizing problems, and our mediating or intervening variables are measures of maternal health, mental health, and lifestyle. So the causal mediation analysis model, what it does, it partitions the total effect of socioeconomic conditions on child mental health into two. The one that acts through the proposed mediators, which is called the natural indirect effect, and through mechanisms that, so to say, bypass what are defined as putative mediators. And this is the natural direct effect. Therefore, in this way, we compute what is called indeed the natural indirect effect as the increased risk, I hope you follow me here, as the increased risk of mental health problems that we would see if the socioeconomic conditions were fixed at the top of the socioeconomic conditions hierarchy. So, but at the same time, in this model, the mediators were fixed at those that would naturally occur at low socioeconomic conditions. For the natural direct effect, we measure an increase in mental health risk moving from low to high socioeconomic conditions. So the increase in mental health risk that we would observe if maternal mental health remained at its value before the change. I say that the importance of this method is very much tied to the possibility to disentangle effects and identify clear policy entry points for intervention. So these, as well as not be done before in the literature with such a powerful research design based on comparative analysis of cross-national, cross-cohort data. So this is absolutely fascinating to be working with. This now table on the left presents the cohorts that we have had access to up to now for a total of 8 studies. We have the Danish National Bear Cohort in Denmark, the Nymphea study in Italy, the MOBA study in Norway, RAIN in Australia, CHOP, which is a multi-center cohort that was built on randomized controlled trials, and then ELFA in France, INMA in Spain, and ALSPAC in the UK. So all of these studies will be included, as you will see, in most of the exploratory analysis. And we have a total of 250,000 children. So data on around 250,000 children. But our analysis are based on complete cases. So more or less same issues as the ones that Johan presented before. And we will see that the analytical sample changes as a function of the variables introduced in each set of the analysis. So just as a brief introduction to the general distribution of gender, for instance, you can see that the distribution is pretty balanced across the cohort. And as we are focusing on externalizing, I reported here the time of measurement of each cohort in terms of the child age, and we can see how this varies across cohorts. So, for instance, in the Danish DNBC, Danish National Bear Cohort, we have 2 time points at age 7 or 8, and then 11 to 14. And for mobile, we have externalizing scores for ages 3 and 5. So the number of complete cases for externalizing score varies across cohorts, with a minimum of around 725 cases for Nymphea and around 170,000 for the MOBA cohort. Also, here the range of the raw scores and prorated scores for externalizing varies across cohorts, age, and instrument. As cohorts have measured externalizing scores using sometimes different questionnaires and also different questionnaires for the different age groups. So you can see there is a lot of heterogeneity, even just in terms of the measuring instrument that was used within each cohort. The instruments, for instance, I don't want to go too much into the details of it, but I think this is basically one of the reasons why we spent in my team quite a lot of time trying to understand what the best way of rendering these comparative analysis on such a heterogeneous way of measuring this indicator of mental health would have best been done. And we decided in the end, which is one of the first steps that we have taken towards finalizing our analysis. We decided to standardize the scores across studies by following what the LifeCycle consortium in the harmonization manuals proposed, which was indeed the use of percentile scores, which are calculated as age and cohort specific. So the graph on the left here presents the quantile distribution of the percentile scores across the cohorts. Please take these just as a representation of the standardization results, not as a descriptive results, because we cannot assess prevalence, of course, with percentile scores. The use of raw and prorated scores in the literature is generally not recommended for this type of measures. And so we will be indeed using these percentile scores, and they represent the position of each child along the distribution of scores in a scale that goes from 0 to 100. So we can use also percentile scores as continuous as well as dichotomous. And by choosing a cutoff of around the 90th percentile, the literature suggests that that's a good threshold to identify children that are very likely to be suffering from borderline externalizing issues. So these graphs are showing the distribution of some of our mediators, in particular related to the perinatal maternal mental health indicators by U-Silk quintiles. And these descriptives were all produced within DataSHIELD, and the results extracted and the graphs just plotted for simplicity in Excel, again, because some graphics are in development within DataSHIELD, but it was just, again, matter of making things slightly quicker as well to present some results in the last few presentations that I've been giving about these. So the thing that I have to say about this is that, unfortunately, about these graphs, is that, first of all, unfortunately, the variable of U-Silk income is not available in the Australian cohort RAIN, where we have, however, a parental education measure but the analysis for this cohort will be basically stopped from now on, more or less. But further analysis will be carried out using maternal and paternal education. So not all the maternal mental health variables as well are available across all the studies. Therefore, you can also see the reduced number of studies in some of these graphs. As I said before, income is our exposure and maternal mental health is our mediator. And the social gradient in maternal mental health, as you can see, is quite evident across the various cohorts. However, you can see also that it's quite mild for some of them, such as ENDC and INFEA, which, however, we have to be careful in the conclusions that we make because, as we discussed in other circumstances, there are some important pieces of information to be taken into account in terms of measurement issues and population selectivity across the cohorts, which complicate, of course, this type of analysis, but will be taken into account at a later stage. So this is, I would say, my almost final slide, because in this slide I present the results of one of our preliminary models on the assessment of the effect of income and postpartum depression and gender on the binary outcome for externalizing issue. And due to comparability issues across ages as well, we only selected the studies with scores available for children aged only 10 to 14 and presented the results for the cohort with valid cases on all the 4 variables included here. So further analysis are being carried out for the younger ages in other cohorts as well. And as I said before, REINE does not have a variable for EU-SILC income, and so it's not here for that reason, but further analysis will be carried out there as well. As expected, we can see a protective, in terms of summary of the results for this graph, we can see that there is a protective effect, clear protective effect of being born in a family which belongs to the least deprived income quintiles, and the relationship is valid for other quintiles as well when compared to the most deprived quintile across cohorts on the presence of externalizing problems, borderline externalizing problems in childhood. So the odds ratios of presenting behavioral issues are significantly higher across cohorts when the mother suffered from postpartum depression, with a non-significant effect for the smallest, the smallest cohort that we have here, smallest in terms of sample size, which is CHOP. And also, as robustly found in the literature, females are significantly less likely than males to present externalizing issues. These are, as I said, preliminary results that we are working on. And also we started working on further descriptives of other intervening variables, such as child breastfeeding, alcohol intake during pregnancy. And I'm also working on the associations between these and measures of socioeconomic conditions in the line of what I did for the descriptive associations of the mental health, maternal mental health indicators. As you can see, there are some very interesting differences across cohorts here. And also, finally, these other graph that just shows the prevalence of the number of cigarettes smoked during pregnancy across cohorts. This as well is one of our intervening variables. Just the conclusion, The next steps involve, of course, further descriptive analysis, as I said, also run further generalized linear models with a study level meta-analysis approach to assess the effect of other mediators, confounders, such as maternal mental age, and other stratifiers, such as ethnicity, for instance. And then quite a lot of sensitivity analysis based on different externalizing percentile score thresholds as well, and age groups, and more importantly, mediation analysis with the functions that have already been developed and are almost ready to use once they will be loaded by each cohort. And so we'll be starting also running the study level meta-analysis with mediation included. Just to say that there is a presentation from Dimitris on the mediation package tomorrow at 11:50. And yes, I'm looking forward to that, although yes, more than that, I'm looking forward to be using those functions soon. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks very much, Gabriella. It's a really nice presentation. Hopefully Sido's profiles will speed up the installation of the DS mediation package.
Yes, hopefully, yes, I'm sure it will.
Do we have any questions? Simon.
Hello, thank you for a really interesting talk. This may have been something that I missed rather than wasn't covered, but I wondered whether you're also looking at, because I saw obviously there was the direct link between socioeconomic status and the behaviours, and then an alternate route going via mother's mental health. But I wondered whether you looked the other way. So does a mother's mental health also impact on the family's socioeconomic status?
So yes, talking about reversal causation, absolutely, that would be part of the sensitivity analysis that we will carry out, including, of course, yes, any particular, I think in particular, any details regarding when we got these measures for, because obviously temporality is very important in assessing reverse causality. Yeah, so that will be absolutely done. Up to now, I haven't run the analysis with maternal mental health as the exposure. I will definitely do that.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking, obviously, well, not obviously, but some people with mental health problems, it may be difficult to hold down full-time employment and things like that. So that might also, that's the route I was thinking. So yeah, no, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and regarding these, another really interesting development of this analysis would be using the function for the GLM, well, mixed model regression type of functions that have been recently developed in DataSHIELD to account for potential trajectories of maternal mental health. And we do have income in LifeCycle measured for each time point available in the various cohorts. So that would be really interesting to see how the trajectories of maternal mental health develops in comparison with trajectories of socioeconomic status using that variable. Yeah.
Yes, and I suppose as well there would be, or the potential for if socioeconomic status is actually increasing but still low, then that may be better than if it's higher and decreasing, for example, in terms of the stress that it generates. So maybe that would be something else as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just on the, you talked about the fact that RAIN don't have the EU silk indicator. Have you considered using, because they do have household income, have you considered using that variable as a kind of a proxy, or I guess the EU silk is kind of a proxy for household income?
Yes, that would be done together with using the parental education variable. Yes, that would be the alternative. But I think the income variable for RAIN is the same income variable that is available for the other cohorts longitudinally, in terms of at each time point that there is a measurement for the child. But of course, the point is that, yes, we need to do some extra calculations there to try and transform it into an equivalized household income as well, based on the number of the household members. But yes, that's part of the various sensitivity analysis that we will have to carry out, indeed, due to the fact that not all the variables are available in each cohort. Yeah.
And I just had one extra question. It was just about, because I know when you started the study, you weren't sure if you would actually calculate the combined estimate, because maybe the mediators are different in the different countries, or they have different mediating effects. Is that still your intention? Or I guess you'll wait to see what the results are looking like?
Yes, still waiting to see what the main results are going to be like. But I think also the DS, Dimitris, if you can help me with the name of the specific function, it was oh yes, DS multimed, which is a specific function for causal analysis that allows also to run sensitivity analysis by using different variables, multiple mediators separately. So that would be really interesting to try as well.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. Well, thank you very much for your talk and all the other talks in the session. I think it was a really nice session. So I think we're going to have a coffee break now, but we'll meet back in half an hour. So that's 4:30 if you're in Europe, and or the most of Europe, yeah, 3:30 if GMT. And there's also the breakout rooms if you want to join one of those. Okay, thank you.